My name's Simon Nye. I'm a writer, have been for full time for wow, 30 over 30 years. Um, Having done a few things before, obviously. And I've started with novels and then I graduated, that isn't the right word. Then I became a sitcom writer. And I love half hours, but I've sort of drifted again, maybe towards slightly longer form comedy dramas. I did Remember Having Badly back in the 90s and a few other sitcoms. I did the Durrells in a few years ago, and been lucky enough to work pretty much consistently. And now I'm rehearsing a play. So I've done a lot of things. Some of them very
Brilliant.
bad.
All of which I want to hear all about. But you've left out a few things, obviously, because you've done so much. Basically, you're one of our top TV comedy writers, and it's a great honour to have you, Simon. So thank you for doing this. You left out that you've won BAFTAs, you've done all, awards galore. So shall we start at the beginning and tell me how you got into the business?
I didn't know anybody in TV or in publishing. My parents were, though, drama teachers. So we were dragged off to shows and pantos and amateur and professional, which I think that was my start effectively. And as a result, I did languages university, and then I went to work in the world and theatre box offices because it was a huge laugh, and it was the West End, and it was great. And then and also you got free tickets. There was a hotline between theatres, and so I saw lots of shows. Um, and meanwhile, I did manage to carve out the time to write. I think I did a radio play maybe to start with. I did, um, basically novels. I thought writing was novels. I didn't have any sort of notion of anything really, in very naive about. And I really did. I think I'm not making it up when I think I did think actors sort of made it up, TV comedy, and what a shaming admission that is. But
It's
so
brilliant. That's
I am, but
really
I think naivety maybe has its part, because that you're not then just confounded by the problems that are ahead. Um, and also, I think I wouldn't necessarily recommend starting with a novel, because it can drive you mad, and it's too much loneliness and too much isolation. But I did do that, and I actually was quite good at carving out the time here and there, even though I lived in quite a fun, crowded a house share in Camden Town. And I found more time when I was a student doing a translating course to, being a student, a lot of free time. I don't know about now, but back then. So I wrote first a very odd novel, about, not odd, but I don't, anyway, about medieval life, slightly allegorical. Haven't read it literally for 35 years. And then I wrote Remember Having Badly novel, and it was eventually published. It took 2 or 3 years to get sort of, not so much accepted, but to come out. And so you do need a bit of patience. And then I was, having had the novel published by Penguin. I my guardian angel, Beryl Virtue, who sadly died last year, eminent producer, agent, reformatting innovator, who worked with the greats of the 60s, Spike Milligan,
it
and
was amazing. I mean,
yeah,
no
and
praise is too high.
yeah, and sort of wore her pioneering path lightly, and she didn't make a big thing about it, but she was doing amazing things, and then went on to form Hartswood Films. But
So
she was actually,
how did you come by her? Sorry to interrupt.
she had read, actually not even the novel at first, but she'd read a Penguin sort of leaflet about what was coming out, and she knew Harry Enfield via her daughter, and she, Sue, who's now also top eminent producer, and she thought this lots of dialogue in the book, so she thought it would make a good sitcom. And there were a lot of sitcoms on at the moment at that time. There was sort of, it was that sort of a hey. I don't think it was a heyday in terms of quality, but there were lots of things like ITV did. People that younger people under 50 won't know, like Donald Sinden doing rather fruity, slightly theatrical half hours.
Mm.
Um, and we
So,
joined that. That
sorry. So she
we
didn't. You didn't know her. It was. It
didn't
was.
know her at all. No, we had
She
lunch.
contacted you. Go on.
Yeah,
Go on. You had lunch and.
I was a translation in the city actually, and for a Swiss bank, and nobody's ever been less good at pretending to be a banker. But I went off, and she said, "Well, do you want to try and write a script?" And I don't. She just didn't. She was actually. It was a low point for her. So she. It was a great feat of optimism on her part, because I'd never written for TV. The book, has its moments, but isn't really very good. So anyway, so I cobbled together some scenes. Well, I think a proper script, a half-hour script using dialogue from the book, and she was encouraging, which again was a great feat of essentially lying, because I didn't know what I was doing. It wasn't com; it was just an excerpt from a book. But she nurtured me, and she
so
taught me how to do
did
it.
she script edit, or did she bring a script edit?
Yeah, she was. I mean, it was back in the day when a producer did everything. There was none of this 8 executive producers, the writer getting an honorary exec credit. For those of you know, well, everybody knows what that means, because you watch Succession, and is it literally 14 executive producers come up? Men Behaving Badly had no executive producers, I don't think, and it just had Beryl Virtue, producer, and that was script editing, making painful calls to people, and begging calls, and so
yes.
But she was great at that. And then as soon as you get a director on board, in my case Martin Dennis, who directed most of my sitcoms, then you get another layer of help.
Yes. Yes. So you learned basically on the hoof to write a sitcom.
Yes, and I made efforts to in sort of in the 80s to when I was in my 20s to get some guidance. And I tried to get on, maybe I didn't try very hard, but I think I tried to get on evening classes, free evening classes. I had no money. I think they were more for creative. Even back then, there were a few creative writing courses, but they were always full. And so I don't think that even back then there was TV writing course.
No.
That, hence me thinking it was made up by actors on the day. So I had no guidance, but we have guidance in a sense, because we've all watched TV,
Yes. So what do you think, now you're so successful, what do you think are the important elements of a sitcom? Where does it start for you? Does it start with character? Does it start with plot? Does it start with structure?
For me, back then, it's different now, because you've got it's a more crowded market, so you've got to try harder to grab the attention of commissioning people. And but for me, I wanted, and I still think it's a good guiding light, to have a lot to say, because the worst thing about writing is when you think there's nothing. I've used everything on the first 10 pages. Hence, in my case, Men Behaving Badly, which was just about men talking nonsense and sort of, but also finding their way and being stupid, and occasionally hitting a pleasure load, often to do with drinking or women. But there's a lot to say, I think, even though I'd actually never flat shared with a man, and never have still. But I did share a house, and I was sharing a house at the time with lots of women, and we're all sort of the same, aren't we? So that was a big area. And I also then shortly after went on did a sitcom called Is It Legal, which was an office thing. So I had worked in offices. So it's pretty basic advice, but along the lines of write about what you know, or at least have been exposed to, or feel is a rich seam. And I think now the temptation is to look for, a ghost sitcom, or that's done very well, so that's a bad example. A sitcom about something quite niche, and niche is great if you've conquered that niche. So I just look for riches in whatever area you choose to write.
And then what comes next? Is it character? Is it?
I think it's sort of a structure is rather a grand and confusing word, but sort of it's in the case of Men Behaving Badly, it was there was a sort of structure was 2 people in a flat, so that's, I suppose, that situation and character. But you could see the 2 of them sitting there, and that's a sort of and with people sort of, I think I had a visual image of the 2 of them sitting there on the sofa, and people coming into their lives, and character, you just got to. And I don't work from people I know, so I know some people do. So I never thought this is great. I can write about X because they've done amazing, funny, inspiring things. So it was always just to start by slapping an adjective, a simple adjective on somebody. So I suppose the Durrells is for anybody that's seen it, is it was family of a mother and 4 children, and they're real people. So I didn't have to work too hard to find the adjective for them. So there's a writer in the family, Larry, who's you could say is sort of pretentious. There's a failing son who's slightly the butt of jokes and goes shooting. So I suppose you'd say, I don't know what the adjective, but you know, so and then you expand from that. So, but don't be ashamed to say this. You know, if you've got a list of 6 characters, let's not say stupid because that's disrespectful and unhelpful. But you know, perhaps pompous or finding themselves or a blurter.
Yes, or a bit duller. So
yeah.
Are you saying that sitcom characters aren't quite real? There is this theory, isn't there, that a sitcom character can just be described in 1 or 2 words, and then you pretend that they're real, and it's your job to persuade the audience and trick the audience into the fact that they are real, but they're really quite simple and there to serve the gags.
I think you start there, and then I mean, I think as well as choosing the basic trait just to start with before you add layers. You need some, even in a comedy, maybe particularly in a comedy, you do need the classic drama thing, which is conflict. So you don't want, even if it's, or particularly if it's a family, say you want them to have their own role within that family and their own in the dynamic of the family. And you know, there's lots of theories of character which you don't need to worry about, but sort of there's the oppressors and the oppressed. You know, there's the victims and the and that doesn't really help the writing. But afterwards, you can sort of see a pattern. But I think you've just got to you've got to sort of like being with the. It's obvious, isn't it? Like being with the characters. But that doesn't mean they have to be nice people. In fact, maybe the opposite is true, as we know from Succession and other shows. It's the monsters that keep you coming back.
But what you're saying, I think, is a variety of monsters, that you need a spread of characters.
Yeah, absolutely. And do, if you can, you know, if it helps you, certainly start use people that you know. You know, use a parent or a sister or something. And because there is, what is reality and naturalism, and you know, I just think you've got to, the important thing is to be interesting, really.
Sure. And then what do you do? So you've got an idea and you've got some characters. What's your how do you these days go about writing a new sitcom, creating?
Well, for all the importance of character, and I made the mistake of not having enough plot when I started and having really, you know, just a handful of scenes and like a play, really. Maybe that was why. But I think now and for good reason, we're trying to keep up with failing attention spans, classic American comedies in the back of our minds where everything is just powered in and rich. So I would do for a half-hour show, I might do a 3-page outline, say, with scenes specified. I'm quite you won't get it right the first time, but you know, and I'd spend as long. I might spend as long on the plot, you know, the 3-4 page plot, than I would on the actual writing of the show. I wouldn't go longer, you know, and it is. I mean, I don't do it really, but some people love to, you know, leave a gap or leave the ending to surprise themselves, or they kind of know the shape, but they don't, you know, want to box themselves in. So I know where personally, I gather people like Jed Mercurio tend to write without specifically knowing where they're going, but I have a shape mapped out, and it might be 18 scenes, you know, it might be possibly more if it's
okay,
a single camera, which it is these days. Really.
And then you do a fairly quick first draft.
I
or
don't actually. I think it's good to do a first draft. The what is it? The splurge draft, the vomit draft, um, but I don't really. I tend to move through at a slow pace, and you will pick up speed if it's most people, I think, and the joy of completing the thing means you will accelerate. So the first half will take much longer than the second half. So don't lose heart. Um, a page a minute, roughly. I use Final Draft because you have to really, as a word processing program. I don't know why, because I don't think it's particularly good, but it's got us by the throat.
and
There, I know
then
there are others.
and then at what stage does your producer or script editor or whoever see that? Have you got someone
Well, I'm
with
yeah,
you?
I'm not a sharer, and so I don't share it halfway through unless it's going really badly or I'm very confused. So I would wait till so I know some people like that. They like to share it with a loved one if they can find one. But I am.
You don't have any loved ones.
I don't have any loved ones, and my wife of many, many years has only read one script of mine, and that was very recently.
Wow.
I think it was for a play, and I think she thought, well, if I'm going to see this thing, I better read it just to check that it's worth going. Um, she's lovely, absolutely lovely. But I think let's put it this way: some loved ones or good friends don't want to be in the position of having to say that's fantastic, because that's what you want, really.
Mm.
Whatever we say, we want them to say, I've never read anything that's quite as amazing as this. How did you do it?
That
So
is
yeah,
that's true. I'm sure that's true, but some people also need notes and
they
have.
do. Yeah, if there's practice, I have to say I love notes, and actually I'm quite obedient. And some writers hate notes, and they take it as a badge of honor to resist the notes and fight them, and sometimes storm out of a meeting if you get as far as that. But so it's not about the notes. It's not about wanting to do your own thing, but it is about knowing who the notes are coming from and trusting the notes. I mean, when I was starting and somebody gave me a script, I wouldn't know how to judge it really, and you want encouragement, and then there's always things to say that are encouraging. So, but just tread warily, and do well, again, do what, yeah, as you say, do what is the most positive thing for you that keeps you going, keeps you enjoying the process, and maybe keeps your marriage together, because it's a shared project.
Several things to pick up on and think different things you said, but you have written, as you said, you've written The Durrells and you've written Men Behaving Badly. I mean, you've written loads of other things as well, but those two are quite different things. One I would call a sitcom, one I would probably call a comedy drama.
Yeah.
I mean, it feels to me like the two are blurring these days.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, and that's good for many reasons, because there was the ridiculous situation which still persists in some, BBC say, of half hours comedies being half hours and dramas being an hour, and that's not really simple as that, is it? As we know from some great half hours, particularly that blur the lines. So I mean, people like Netflix, I think, and others are now merging their departments, so that you won't have to make that tricky decision.
does it feel like you're writing something different to you, or
It doesn't really, because I am quite joke oriented, and they're not jokes as such, obviously, but they are. Just to keep the fun going. I'm quite simple personally. I do like to, even in the Durrells, I do like to have comedy bubbling under. And my defense is that that's life. We're suffused with comedy and banter, and sometimes it's annoying, and sometimes it's just it's a way of avoiding serious issues. But I think it is part of the human essence. So I'm sort of unapologetic about it. But that, yeah, but it's but other things have to rush in if you're doing a drama, a completely sort of official drama, and they are, soul and phrases like emotional development. No, what's the one? What's the one they tend to use? Anyway, emotional through line, and those phrases that are awful part of the jargon landscape of TV, but it just means really making sure the characters are moving along, aspiring to things and failing or not failing in them. They are changing in drama. That's again the classic difference between comedy and drama. In comedy, you end the show exactly where you started in terms of emotional development and
Or
everything
you
else.
used to, possibly. Do
Yeah,
you?
no, again, this is and I yeah, but this is part of the blurring, isn't it? And comedies now tend to be half hours, tend to be serials rather than complete one-offs. That's a quite a big difference, I think.
I mean, and it started, well, I don't know if it started, but certainly you can go back as far as Friends, and there was character development across the series, weren't there? And
Absolutely. Yeah.
famously there was "We're on a break, we're not on a break," and all of that kind
Yeah.
of stuff.
Although that was mainly plot, wasn't it, really? I mean, that was things
Yes,
happening
that was
rather
more
than
plot.
but yeah, there were, I mean, Rachel, she moved from being a ditzy um privileged girl, young, she was a girl, I think. Well, yeah, anyway,
Yeah,
young
she
woman
grew up
in
a bit.
man and grew up and retained her essential well, I don't know if well, you've watched the show, so whatever you want to call it.
Yes.
But yeah, and I think I would say it's more of a Joey didn't really develop, did he? And we loved him for not developing. We
Yes.
embraced his lack of
Yes.
movement.
Yes. Asher Tiller, for those who don't know, producer of The Office, People Just Do Nothing, Staff Lets Flat,
Legend.
well, exec producer of some of those, obviously. He said recently that he didn't think The Office would get bought this today, or it may well not get bought today because not enough was happening.
Yeah.
That's true.
Well, that goes to what I was saying. But when I started, I like to choose a big, just a big sort of experiential area, and then you find the plots within it. Yeah, maybe. I mean, but now it would get on if Martin Freeman. I know he wasn't a star then, but if any of the characters were stars, then we are more star driven. And so I think maybe there's three things. I'm just making it up as I go along, but one of you got to either have a high concept that people are intrigued enough to watch just to try it out, or a big name, or something that is shouty,
Because the
and
marketplace is
because it's
bigger and
yeah,
more saturated.
um, yeah, and so be it. And I think we writers all are rather ambivalent about that, obviously, because we want the main event to be the writing, but it never really will be. We have our people, they want to see somebody who they know, or some new dynamic, or their own personality represented in some cases, whether it's classically underrepresented people in terms of diversity or age or class. You want to see yourself up there on the screen. We've neglected certain sectors of the population. If
Yeah,
you're 75, then you think it's you. If
yes.
you're a black teenager, you think it's you. If you think it's so it's, and now increasingly you would say rather annoying, it's sort of middle class people like me thinking, well, actually I'm not. So we're all deluded in a way, and none of us have the statistics, but anyway, that's why I need a range of people and a range of shows, and there's room for everybody.
Sure. Top tips for new writers. Have you got any? What would you say is the most important thing?
It's all about keeping yourself charged up, isn't it? Really, I think, and I mean, this is it will sound like negative advice, but starting a project is the most exciting thing. Ending it is just brilliant because you've lived with this thing for. So getting through the tricky middle bit, the actual writing, is the harder thing, and it is. I mean, in a very sort of basic things. We're all, aren't we better at writing, paying attention in the morning? So just try and carve out some time in the morning rather than at the end of the day when we're all dead to the world. So that's not always easy. God knows I know. I was lucky enough to do a job some of the time where I was at a screen as a translator. I didn't know what I was doing, so I was, basically lying to your employer. That kind of thing is quite good.
Yeah.
If they're big, who cares? Big multinational, who doesn't? Um, um, my experience, people are really good about supporting your endeavor. So, so if you say I'm trying to write something, the odd person will think, well, you're kidding yourself, but ignore them, and they will try and help you find the time. I didn't cast off from my proper job until I was, on air essentially. So I'm quite nervous about people. Maybe you have to do it, but taking a year off, just do it in the knowledge that it's not going to paralyze you. Try to not, because that can happen. That you've cleared your decks, you've packed your best friends off to, and you said this is my time, but then the pressure can grab you. So try and, I would say, write for an hour every day, at least, and then see how that goes, and then you can try and prize yourself away from the money needs gradually.
Your personal routine is to write in the morning.
No, of course I know what the advice is, but I don't do it. I really don't do it. I mean, no, I know. No, I do the thing you shouldn't do at the moment, which is very kind of diffuse writing, or the laptop always around. But in the evening. So I don't recommend that really. I think the very sort of the old novelist advice was, if you have free time, you write in the morning, this is very Jane Austen, you in the afternoon you read and you learn and you perhaps revise a bit, and in the evening you meet people and you have so you have something to write about the next morning. You can try that, but it may life gets in the way, doesn't it?
There is life.
But it is great. I mean, I do think it's the best job it's the best job. I mean, and there are frustrations, and there are frustrations of although that's the bit I like, the collaborating and people sort of slightly whittling away at your lovely work. But that just remember that and there are lots of forms of writing. So don't slavishly do one thing if it's not working for you. I mean, try and write a longer thing. And there's all these endless amounts of, smaller TikToks and onwards. It's a good time to be a writer, I think.
And right now you're doing a play, you said.
I am, yes, the Crown Jewels in the West End. It's got quite a lot of TV names, and it's a sort of a well, it's a comedy, true story based on a heist in the Royal. So it's new to me. I've done translations of plays and enjoyed it, but yeah, well, but that kind of writing is I'm used to TV writing where you move on generally after 2 pages. You think I've got to do another scene here, whereas this is 7 pages and scenes still going on.
And is that good? Are you enjoying it?
I am. I'm loving it. It's a really nice. Well, it's just the antidote to being on your own in a room, and it's fun, and there's a shared fear, if you like, of it going horribly wrong, which can spill into needless worry, and we're all at the back of our minds. We're all got to sort of, we shouldn't, but the kind of reviews, sort of, the bad review day if you read your reviews for your pleasure. But yeah, really, really. I mean, it's a real, because you see the audience laughter. I'm not used to the audience. Oh, apart from sitcoms where with an audience, it's not. We don't get that privilege, writers, to seeing people. And we see people therefore leave before the interval. That kind of thing. So that'll be an ego struggle. But it's anyway. It won't be the actors' fault, because it's a lot. It's got some great comedy people.
Right. Good. Simon, I could talk to you forever, but
it's nice to talk about the craft, isn't it? As we as we're not pretentious, but anyway, yeah. And I like I say, just give it a go. It's a great life if you can do it.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thanks,
very
much, and good luck with the play.